Hi, welcome to part 3 of the alternate endings to my Earth Live lesson on Charles Darwin and the Galapagos Islands. Originally shown on Lizzie Daly's YouTube channel, it is there for catch-up should you go and want to watch it. I highly advise it before watching any of these smaller clips. But the 3 small clips are different endings that I could have talked about. The 3 animals that I am talking about here are part 1 being the Galapagos finches, part 2 the Galapagos mockingbirds and their vampiric habits, and now part 3, which is the giant Galapagos tortoise. The original talk over on the YouTube channel has a bit on the waved albatross. Highly advise going to watch that first. But the giant Galapagos tortoises. Now, these can be considered as the lumbering giants of the Galapagos Islands, the megafauna, as it were. Some of the species can grow up to 300 kilos and over 1.5 metres in length. They are big. I mean, in Darwin's words, these animals grow to an immense size, several so large that it required 6 or 7 men to pick one up. Now, they were also very slow. I mean, they were also incredibly rich in fresh meat and water, and the crewmates of the HMS Beagle would have been picking them up to put on their boats, because they could survive for very, very long periods without any food and provide a fresh source of meat and water should the crewmen needed it at any point during their voyage. But the realities of 19th century exploration and travel required this to an extent, although there was not much planning or forethought into this whatsoever, so some of the species were pillaged significantly to the extent where one of the species was extinct by the time Charles Darwin got to it, and the 150 years of humans actually visiting the Galapagos Islands. But if you want to see the realities of 19th century exploration, again, that is actually at the end of my original talk, my original Earth Live lesson. Now, they are an amazing example of evolution that Charles Darwin didn't pick up at all, very similar to the Galapagos finches. He had to be told about those and told about the pattern. He just didn't notice it, he was focusing on other things, and it's kind of similar with the Galapagos giant tortoise. Now, he was told by the governor of the islands at the time, we can tell you where that tortoise comes from, purely by the shape of its shell. We can tell you which island it originated from. And he thought this quite incredible. Each island has a different habitat of sorts. They're either drier than each other, more foliage, bigger trees, cactuses, different herbs, different amounts of rock, different temperatures, different wind speeds, all sorts of different factors, meaning that each island is somewhat unique. With the different amount of rain also on the different islands, different amounts of plants grow, which have dramatically changed the shape of the shell itself. This can be seen in the prickly pear of Opuntia, which can be seen in huge forests across the Galapagos Islands. Now, when the Galapagos tortoise comes to that spiky layer that it can't eat, there is a pressure, an adaptive pressure, on that animal to basically raise its neck higher to get at the soft, juicy, non-prickly bits, which are above that layer. So those islands with more of these prickly pears, the neck and the nape of the shell itself of these tortoises is more pyramidal, more saddle-like. There's a quite a large lip at the top, meaning the head can actually extend upwards and grab at like taller and juicier, more succulent foliage up at the top. Now this can be seen in the Abington Island or the Pinter Island tortoise, Lonesome George, you might know him by. A very tall, long hood at the base of the neck on the shell. Now, if it is eating lush grasses from the floor itself, there's no need for that at all, and it can the tortoise can extend its neck downwards and munch quite happily on the lawn, and therefore those like the San Cristobal Island tortoise doesn't have that lip at the top of its shell. It's just peters off straight down, and the neck can come out and graze quite happily on the grass. And that is how you tell the difference, and that is how natural selection has impacted these animals. The shell was also quite heavily experimented on by Charles Darwin himself when he was out there. I shall quote here, "I frequently got onto their backs, and then upon giving them a few raps on the hinder part of their shell, they would rise up and walk away, but I found it very difficult to keep my balance." Yes, he used them as taxis to get around the island for a bit. Not something I can absolutely recommend. Please don't go rounding round. And not any tortoises, giant Galapagos tortoises, your pet tortoise, don't stand on them, please. However large. But it kind of showed the point of how large these things were. and how, because they've got no natural predators, they didn't need to be fast, and they could grow to huge, huge sizes at huge, huge ages. Now, when I saw them for one of the first times in a field, I thought, I was with a group of my fellow zoologists, and we were looking at a field of lava rocks, or so I thought, in amongst the grasses. Apart from they weren't rocks that I was looking at, I was quite confused. I've been staring at this field for quite some time, trying to figure out what everyone was looking at, and then some of the rocks started to move around a bit, very, very slowly. They were giant tortoises. It was quite extraordinary to see. Now, something cool about the Galapagos Island tortoises is that they are seed dispersers and ecosystem engineers. What that means is wherever they go, they can help an ecosystem grow behind them. They can develop previous kind of barren plains of lava into fairly well-constructed ecosystems. So they are slow and they don't need to eat much, but when they do, they ingest seeds and fruits and nuts, and when they go to a new area, they will defecate and poop out many of those seeds. And the poop is a perfect fertilizer for it, and it's in this new area where no other plants are competing with it, so these plants can grow on their own and develop. These are the pioneer species which can grow into huge ecosystems. A perfect example of where this has happened is on one of the volcano craters of Isabella Island. Within the crater itself, there is a pool of water and a population of tortoises, which at some point in the last million years have probably got stuck there. They have eaten the grasses and fruits from around the coastline where it's verdant and lush. Now they've wandered up to the side of the crater, gone into the crater, and then have failed to get back out of the crater again. But those in the crater itself, supplied with the water, and the plants which have grown from their poop, have developed into a very nice ecosystem, and they're perfectly fine eating the grasses and the plants up there, and are slowly developing into their own species, different to that of the coastline, where they lived a million or so years ago. Now, after another million years perhaps, that species will be completely different to the ones on the coastline, and there will be a new, perhaps forest or other ecosystem within the crater itself, because of the tortoises that got stuck there. Now, because these tortoises have never been hunted, they've never needed to be that fast, they've never had any predators. However, when cats and dogs came in and invaded, they predated upon the slow-moving tortoises, as did people. But also it was the goats. Now, it seems weird, a goat invasion infecting tortoises, but the goats ate everything. All of the foliage, all of the low foliage that the tortoises would have otherwise eaten, all the grasses, all the plants, the cactuses, everything was gone to these tortoises. Over a 25-year period, all of those goats were exterminated. Now, it may seem a little harsh, but they were on the brink of completely destroying some of the most unique species of tortoise in the world. It was a very necessary step to take. Yet hopefully what I've just shown with the ecosystem engineering and the fact that they're not quite fast enough to out-evolve, out-adapt these new predators of them, the power of natural selection. Some of the craters, more than 1 kilometre across, now have its own microcosm, its own ecosystem within the microcosm of the Galapagos Islands. It's quite extraordinary. So this is a wonderful example of evolution by natural selection upon these tortoises, in the way their shape of their shell has changed, in terms of what they're eating, in terms of how big they are generally, that Darwin described 25 years after the voyages. Evolution by natural selection, one of the greatest theories that has ever been developed in modern biology, how we've changed the way that we look at the world. And it can be perfectly demonstrated in these tortoises, and he didn't know the importance of what these tortoises could show. Anyway, I hope you've learned something about the natural history of these Galapagos tortoises. I hope you've learned something about Darwin and what he was doing out there on the Galapagos Islands, and I hope through all kind of 3 little clips I've done and the main talk on Darwin's Galapagos that you've learned some really cool stuff. If you did enjoy these, don't hesitate to let me know or ask me any questions that you might have. I have more talks and some documentaries I've done on my website at thomasland.co.uk. Feel free to check them out there. And again, highly advise going to watch the original talk on Lizzie Daly's channel. Well, thank you very much for watching. Keep tuned for any more documentaries I'm pushing out, and see you later.